Thank you, Russ, and welcome everybody. It's delightful to be here. It is a pleasure to welcome Professor Rafael Luciani, STD, is an expert on synodality in the Catholic Church and is one of Pope Francis's leading advisors on our church's current synodal process. He is working to create a new invigorated reception of Vatican II, to create a church that walks together to discern the future. Professor Luciani argues that what is at stake is nothing less than the church's fidelity to her calling as a follower of Jesus and her response to the new signs of the times. He sees synodality as a reordering of relationships within the church. This reordering will create a new ecclesial we, in which all the faithful, from the Pope to the laity, are equals in a communion with the same responsibility regarding the identity, vocation, and mission of the church. Professor Luciani is a lay theologian from Venezuela who currently serves as an expert of the Theological Commission of the General Secretariat for the Synod of Bishops. He holds degrees of Doctor in Theology and Licentiate in Dogmatic Theology from the Pontifical Gregorian University of Rome, Baccalaureate in Philosophy and Theology from the Pontifical Salesian University of Rome, and Licentiate in Education earned from the Jesuits Catholic University Andres Bello in Caracas. He is an associate professor of the practice at Boston College and is currently engaged in postdoctoral research activities at the Julius Maximilians Universität in Würzburg, Germany. He is the author of Synodality, A New Way of Proceeding in the Church, the book that FutureChurch used during our recent 3-week book study in October. Professor Kristen Kohlberg, one of his colleagues in the synodal office, and the only North American advisor in that office, offered this testimony to Professor Luciani's work. Quote, "It is not an overstatement to say that few people in the world today are doing more to advance the practice and understanding of synodality than Rafael Luciani. Rafael is a leader on the Synod's Theological Commission and on the task force that drafted the document for the continental stage. He has coordinated a massive online course on synodality that has already reached over 100,000 people. He speaks all over the world on this topic, and his book, just referenced, Synodality, A New Way of Proceeding in the Church, is perhaps the single best text for explaining what synodality is and why Pope Francis is calling for it. Rafael is not only a world-class scholar, he has a deep pastoral sensibility and a real love of the church. In addition to that, he is a warm and caring person with a great sense of humor and a devoted friend to many. The global church owes him a debt of gratitude for his tireless efforts." And dear friends, it is my pleasure to welcome Professor Rafael Luciani to the FutureChurch community tonight. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I mean, those words are really touching. Thank you. Well, I wanted to share with you tonight synodality, of course. We're trying to see how this word embraces a new way of proceeding in the church that should lead to a reordering of relationships, of communicative dynamics, such as listening, discernment, and institutions that help us to move forward in elaborating and taking decisions in the church. We all have read the 50th anniversary speech of the commemoration of the institution of the Synod of Bishops that Francis said, and there in that speech, we can remember when he referred to the path of synodality as the path of God that God expects for the church for the third millennium. And this phrase is not a naive phrase, third millennium. Third millennium implies a new institutional model. The first millennium, the church of unity and diversity. A second millennium, influenced by the Gregorian Reform and the Council of Trent, a church that needed in that time to be more homogenized and unified, and created institutions such as parishes and seminaries. But the third millennium then poses a challenge. In the reception of the Second Vatican Council, we find the source of that challenge. And today, the deepening of the ecclesiology of the people of God leads us to this possibility of building a new institutional model that embraces synodality. So a first point, we have listened to the word walking together so many times, but walking together means two specific things. If we read the preparatory document for the synod, that even if it was for the diocesan phase, is a theological document that will accompany the whole process of the synod. In that document, number 28 and number 29 explain very clear what is synodality, understood as walking together. And in 28, walking together is referred to relationships and to structures. It even have the reference to participatory bodies that should be present in our parishes, dioceses, and all ecclesial structures. But it specifically highlights the relationships between subjects, lay, presbyter, religious, bishops, and the Pope. Relationships based in the baptism dignity that provides this horizontal way of interacting among all ecclesial subjects towards a way in which we all can, as Saint Cyprian in the first millennium, the Bishop Saint Cyprian said, be consulted and build consensus, the two practices that characterize a synodal church. And in number 28 of that preparatory document, it refers to how the people of God, the church as people of God, walks together with the entire human family. So we have these two notions, not a church that ad intra revises, discerns herself, and a church that ad extra revises and discerns also herself. We could say a church that should be synodal and missionary at the same time. There is a document that I always suggest to read and to revise and reread of the International Theological Commission on, and it's called Synodality in the Life and the Mission of the Church. This document provides the theological, spiritual, pastoral, historical framework to understand synodality, because synodality is not new. It is rooted in the tradition of the church, and today is deepened by the reception of the Second Vatican Council that Francis has and does. In this document, it is very well explained that the church, people of God, manifest in a concrete way by realizing the communion in walking together. But immediately it says this means gathering in assembly and by active participation of all the members. Assembly, participation of all. We can say, well, today we find so many structures where not everybody is able to participate, or not everybody is led to participate by pastors or bishops, as we have read in the continental document for the current phase. But this means that we are in a transition towards a new institutional model that we have to build together. That's why the expression walking together implies also a prophetic call to each one of us. The church changes as we claim for that change, because we are church as people of God, not simply individuals fragmented in a whole that we call church. In Latin America, as you know, there is a document called Aparecida that responds to the 5th Conference of Latin American Bishops and the Caribbean that Pope Francis received in Evangelii Gaudium and assumes as a framework to think and to discern the church of today. And in that document, we, in 2007, it incorporated the notion of people of God, including the laity as subjects, not objects, elaborating decisions and making decisions with the rest of the faithful, bishops, presbyters, religious, together in regards to the mission of the church. So we can say, well, in some instances that are not pastoral, it doesn't happen and only people make decisions about pastoral issues. Well, in the church, everything is pastoral because the church is missionary. Even, and I always use this example that may sound simple, but even when in a parish, a car is bought by the pastor, it has to have a pastoral use. So everything in the church has to do with pastoral decisions. And synodality is calling to participate, all of us, in that process of elaborating and taking pastoral decisions. A second point is, how do we do this? Synodality brings new communicative dynamics. When I say communicative dynamics, we can refer to listening, a way of communicating, dialoguing, analyzing, even dissensus. And at the same time, all this together has one scope: to build consensus in the whole community. But then we may ask ourselves, well, where is this rooted if it's not new? The Second Vatican Council offers the key concept to understand this, that it is a duty and it is a right in each one of us. The concept is Christi Fideles, which means faithful. And the Pope Francis, since the beginning, has said the Pope is one faithful, the bishops are faithful, the religious are faithful, the presbyters, the lay are faithful. It's a horizontal way to understand that baptism makes us all with the same rights and at the same time with the same duties. In this sense, Francis has always insisted that these communicative dynamics are the only way in which we can build the ecclesial we, the synodal church. Because when we are saying ecclesial we, means a church understood as people of God, because people of God as a concept means the totality of the faithful interacting in the creation of making church, of doing church. Those communicative dynamics are, according to the International Theological Commission's document that I was referring on synodality, it says there are praying, listening, analyzing, dialoguing, advising, but it adds a word, together, together. Because we may be participating in a group, doing all these actions and dynamics, but not together. We may do them in a fragmented way of proceeding. In a synodal church, this is a way of interacting as a community with the scope to build that community in a continuous process of being and becoming church as people of God. So synodality doesn't have an end point because it's a process that generates a new way of proceeding in the church that affects everything in the church. Another point, if the church live this process, which is the starting point to generate the whole process. Francis, in that same speech that I referred at the beginning, for the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the institution of the Synod of Bishops, says that synodality regarding to a synodal church is understood as a church of listening. Synodality as a church of listening. But he says in that same speech that it is a reciprocal listening in which everyone has something to learn. So we can see listening, reciprocal, a learning from that interaction of listening to one another. You are creating there a dynamic in a group, in a gathering, in an encounter. So the action of listening puts in motion a process that permits the conversion of the mentalities, because we are starting to understand the other when we listen to the other, when we dialogue with the other, when we try to understand the arguments of the other on a topic that maybe some of us may disagree or may agree with, and that dynamic leads to an open of our minds to see new possibilities that before individually were not seen. So synodality implies these dynamics, but always lived as a community, in a gathering, reuniting, gathering as an assembly. Assembly means, in this case, synod. It can mean encounter. It can mean community gathering. It has to do with this communal participation of all. To be listened is a right of every person in the church, and listening is a duty proper to those who exercise authority. A pastor in a parish has the duty to listen, the right of listening that we all have, and the bishop as well. So synodality reorders the relationships precisely because it helps us to understand that this is not a concession. Well, I let you to speak because we are now talking about synodality. It is a right because it's rooted in baptismal dignity. So synodality uses mediations, which are or can be called structures. If I don't have the space in the parish, or in the curia, or in the school, or in any institution where we can create these spaces of listening, discerning together, synodality will not have a concrete meaning because it exists in spaces that permits these dynamics, these communicative dynamics. And the scope of doing these dynamics is not simply getting to know each other and becoming more friends. Is to listen to the voice of the Spirit through our interaction as community. And that means to listen to the Spirit through the voice of the others in that group, in that community. So it implies again a conversion, because maybe that person with whom I do not agree is mediating the voice of the Spirit. So if I'm not open to include everybody in that dialogue, I may be closing the door for the Spirit in a simple way. That's why from the bishops to the laity, everybody is implied in this process that we call synodality. To conclude, and then open the more richness part of this, that it is the dialogue. Synodality is not a mode. Synodality is not a method. Synodality is not something that we can do today and tomorrow, no. According to all the speeches of Francis, according to the International Theological Commission that has this most important document on synodality. Synodality is a constitutive dimension of the church. It defines the church, and it is rooted in the tradition of the church. It is not new. It is a rediscovery of our tradition, and it is received in the current tradition that comes from the Second Vatican Council. Synodality then, Pope Francis describes it in the following way. In September 18 of 2021, days before he opened the Synod, he addressed a speech to the Diocese of Rome as Bishop of Rome. And in that day, a couple of days before opening the Synod, he said the following: Synodality is not a chapter in a treatise of ecclesiology, and even less a fad, a slogan, a new term to be used or manipulated in our meetings. Synodality expresses the nature of the church, its form, its style, its mission. We speak of a synodal church, not only of synodal practice, of synodal church. The whole church is synodal, avoiding considering it as one title among others. With this, he wanted to say that not today we're speaking synodality because it's a mode that Francis brought to the church. We're speaking of synodality because it belongs to the very nature of what means to be church today and tomorrow and in every time. Therefore, synodality is a challenge to each one of us. It is not something that we have to wait that comes from Rome. It is something that we can start putting in practice today among our groups. And I finish with an example that just occurred when I was recently in Poland, where, as in many other churches, the bishops do not support much the synodal process. And what I saw there that impacted me, that a group of lay people united with some religious woman, with a couple of presbyters and some religious men, started a movement before the pandemic that today they have gathered people from all over Poland, and they did a process that is called Congress, but it's not a Congress in the sense of a meeting. That's how they called it. And they called it the Congress of Catholic Men and Catholic Women. And they did a weekend of a listening and discerning session, inviting not only Catholics, but atheists. There was a young atheist from school. There was a professor that is atheist from university. There was a person that was agnostic. There was a person that had a transgender son. So by interacting, this is the importance of synodality. By interacting, we start to comprehend the reasons, the arguments, the experience of the others. That's the only way to open our hearts and to our minds and to start converting our mentalities and leaving the space for the Spirit to talk. And I end with this phrase: if we do not open to the other, we may be blocking the Spirit. That's the challenge then of synodality. Let's open our mentalities, our hearts, and in that way, we will be changing structures in the church. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. And if you haven't read his book, please, as Kristen Kohlberg said, this is the best book that you can find. So I've read it thoroughly, and many people joined us for the book study. So if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you want to have a little discussion, please do try to keep it short and to the point. And you can raise your little, do that little reaction button that helps me to see that you have a question. One of the things that I wanted to start with, Rafael, is this question that Peter Hoonerman brings up in your book, and you also talk about it, which is the problem of canon law not really being devised at this point to really, engender a truly synodal church. It's, it's very much a hierarchical model under canon law. And so I know that Cardinal Gretsch had recently said something about the change needed for canon law. Could you speak a little bit about canon law? I know this is a shift in culture, but at what point does the law change to help that shift move forward?
Yes, there should be an alignment between the ecclesiology of the people of God that embraces and leads us to this synodal church and what canon law provides in order to do that. It is clear right now in this synod on synodality that canon law should be considered in order to have a small, mid, or large or huge reforms that permits that in a way that creates new relationship and structures in the church. For example, pastoral diocesan councils and parish councils. Right now, they're not mandatory and they're only consultative. One of the reforms that possibly could be done is that these councils be mandatory and deliberative. So things like that are being taken into account in this synodal process for the first time, because usually synods do not reform canon law. So I guess there is the consciousness that that is needed, and the will, and already identified even some issues that need to be worked and changed.
How does that process actually work? I mean, who makes that shift and who makes those considerations? Who makes that shift? How does that actually work?
Yes, the synod, any synod does not take decisions, does not change properly the synod. I mean, it proposes as a consultative body, and it can identify pastoral priorities and also those things that need to be changed either in the structures or in canon law or in anything that will permit this way of being church. No? So right now you have in the Theological Commission, which is the first time that the General Secretariat, not the Synod, the General Secretariat of the Synod has commissions on theology, on spirituality, on methodology, and on communication. And in the Theological Commission, we have different specializations: pastoralists, canonists, systematicians, theologians from different areas. So from there is an interaction and a discernment that will permit identifying, but also in the same process of the bishops discerning in this final assembly, there will be also proposals. So proposals are not coming from a small group. And even in the document that was already written for the continental phase, and in the coming documents, the Instrumentum Laboris and the next ones, will be proposals. Okay. And that's where we, each of us, can participate making those proposals. It will read even the document that was recently written for the continental phase. It has already things like the pastoral councils and other type of proposals.
Right, very good. So, Sister Maureen, you have a question?
Hello, Rafael. Thank you very much. I very much enjoyed your presentation. I was struck very much by, I guess, toward the end, when you brought up the, I guess, the fact that there are those among us who are very reluctant or resistant to a synodal church. And then you said, you know, you closed with this idea of conversion. And if we're not willing to enter into this, you know, then we're blocking the spirit. But in so much of the reading that I have done on the synod, there is such vitriol that I see in the writing against, from some groups against the synod, titles like destined for disaster, or quasi-theological something. How do you suggest approaching those who are vehemently against, or who a synod, or who view the synod as simply becoming sloppy with our theology? That was a word that was used in one of the articles.
Yes, thank you. Because the continental phase in this new document that was recently written offers a key that is very important. It says, in the list of the excluded, we have also to listen to those that oppose the synodal process. What does this mean? That maybe I need to open my door and sit in the table with those who are against or not in favor of these processes, and establish a dialogue that is not happening. And then, because it's not happening, we have polarization. So I think that the huge effort, it's huge because it needs a lot of patience and the humbleness to approach the other and not waiting to be approached, implies that are we able to sit with those that are against, and not to simply sit because I'm going to hear what they have to say and I'm going to say what I have to say. It's understanding what is behind, which are the arguments, what is the reasoning. But the key to understand the resistance that we're living has to do with the reception of the Second Vatican Council. Right. If the Second Vatican Council is not assumed as the consensus of the church in this moment, well, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
Because we have a problem with tradition. We have a problem with magisterium. So that's where a dialogue has to consider as well. It's like if we're saying, okay, I don't care about tradition. Well, if you don't care about tradition, then in which Catholic church you believe in? So I mean that a dialogue with those who oppose, with the clarity that we are within the tradition of the church, that in this moment is expressed by the ecclesial consensus of the universal church in the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Sister Maureen. Thank you. So Brad, you have a question. You can unmute yourself, Brad.
Oh, habit, sorry. Thank you for a very carefully done talk. I'm very much in support of the theory of what you propound, but I will have to admit I'm very skeptical about how will this actually be received by the hierarchy. And maybe you could go back the last 3, 4, 5 years and say, how receptive have they been recently? So what odds do we have that they will pay attention? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. First, we're living a transition of the institutional model. That's not easy. After the Second Vatican Council, we had many people that left the church, many people that stayed but were not happy with the changes. So anytime we have a transition, we have this reaction, or we have this type of people and ways of thinking. No? The second thing is that in order to let's say, not to fulfill the expectation, but to have clarity that something may be done, we have also to assume another ecclesiology that before was not there. Before, we had an ecclesiology that was universalistic, and every local church looked the same, had to have the same decisions, had to have the same ministries. We are shifting to the ecclesiology of the first millennium, which is the ecclesiology of the local churches. And therefore, we have to convert and accept that maybe some local churches in other continents or in other parts of the world may say, this is not our priority in pastoral terms. So this is also this shift. We're not talking about universal and general expectations. That's why we start from the local churches. But those expectations would require our recovery of the baptismal dignity, and that means that I have the right to claim to the bishop and to the authority to do what has been consulted and what has been discerned, and to let me participate as baptized in that process. So it's not only the hierarchy, it's how do I engage with the hierarchy in my responsibility as a baptized, and also how do I understand that difference will appear, and we cannot expect universal and generalized consequences or results, because this is another ecclesiology. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brad. So Joe, you have a question? You can unmute. I think you need to unmute yet. There you
go. Rafael, I guess I'm following up on what Brad, no, I don't think I am. I'm just on our culture here in the United States of America. We were built up on catechisms and a system of what you've been calling the institutional church. So we have a formula in the United States, which has been very, very effective, and the middle class had enough money to keep the church running and independent. It wasn't possible in other cultures. However, with all this mindset of being an institution with doctrines, facing those doctrines, a lot of us older people have difficulty to go on. But on the other hand, the younger people don't have any problem of walking away, because if you don't go to church on Sunday, you're going to go to hell. Or you eat meat on Friday, you're going to go to hell. The posturing of moral domination in the past has given us an attitude, oh, I got to do what the boss says. I know when I worked in Latin America, the business of being comunidades de base, to be able to get together and talk together, that gave us a softness. It was okay, as long as the bishop listened. But I'm just thinking, we got doctrines that are going to create crises. Can a vision of, oh, let's be a sharing church, dominate the tyranny we already have of this is right and that's wrong? It's 7 sacraments, it's 10 commandments. I just have a fear that we can't change our vocabulary enough to get on and do what you've been telling us to do, not to be sensitive people. In fact, it's easier for women to do than for men to do.
Yes, and thank you, because you refer to these ecclesial-based communities or small Christian communities. That's the future of the church. The future of the church is not to reform simply what we have and have a different parish, is to create also new synodal institutions. We just have one, the Ecclesial Assembly, that has been assumed as a model for the continental phase. And it was celebrated for the first time last year in Latin America. And was the Ecclesial Assembly that in this stage, the continental stage, the bishops will not be majority in the Ecclesial Assembly that will discern this continental phase. This may be a change that may not be right now seen, but when it's put into practice and the interaction of those bishops with the rest, even those that belong to social movements were integrated in the Ecclesial Assembly, you will see a practice. That's the importance, they practice. But my idea of a synodal church has not to do with the model of the parish that we have today and doing some small changes. It's the model of the communities, or as we say in Latin America, community of communities. So if we do that, we are already having the possibility of living that synodal church and not expecting that the pastor and the parish and the curia changes simply, no? So thank you, because that's the key of the future church.
Luciano, I think even the word church is going to have to evolve. That's why I propose one projection that the ones who are called are every human being who comes out of a woman's body. That the kahal, the called, is all those who are alive. Whether they share the same faith and doctrine or not is not important. We all are called out of our mothers by the same living source of life. And that means we got to be able to meld with the whole world, not just with ourselves. I think that'll take 1,000 years, but I think that's a far reach.
Well, the Council of Trent took 100 years to be received, creating parishes and seminaries, and we are right now in the 60th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council, and we still have much to do. I mean, the church changes not at the velocity of other institutions, but we are living right now, that's my personal hope, the possibility and the grace of living a change or a will of change of the institutional model. And that's something that not everybody has lived, as you know, in the past of the church. So at least right now, it's a kairos. Maybe it will advance just a bit or more than we think, but I say it's up to us, not to the bishops, because we can start living this by small communities, and we have to change the chip of what means to be church and not is necessarily the parish.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ah, there she is, our sister Chris Shank. She is the, just so you know, the founding director and co-founder of FutureChurch, our present organization. And she has, I'm sure, a brilliant question. So go ahead, Chris.
I hope so. I have been, let me just say, I've been very gratified, and I would say even unexpectedly gratified by what has happened with the senatorial process in the United States. I think our own synthesis from the US was far more inclusive than I dared to hope. After FutureChurch, we've been around how long? Since 1990, and haven't had a whole lot of inclusion until recently, which is wonderful. We've had very wonderful people along the way, but I want to thank you very much for your work at Frascati in developing the Continental document. And I also I'm very grateful for the diversity of voices that will be engaged in the process in the Continental phase, in the ecclesial assemblies that will be happening. And certainly by the encouragement from the Synod Office for everybody to be engaged to the extent that they can with that. My question has to do, and this is always where I get hung up, is because we don't really have structures right now, except in Latin America, with that allow sort of deliberative voice on the part of all the baptized. And my past experience with synods has been that the bishops do the proposals and then the Pope never did anything about them. I think Francis is completely different. I really trust him completely. But I guess the deal is the deciders are still heavily weighted with bishops. And I'm going to say there are wonderful bishops, and I'm hoping a lot of conversion can be happening all over the place with the continental assemblies. So I guess I secretly am holding a hope that there will be a diversity of lay women and men that will be included in the synod sessions, both next October and in 2004. And in addition to Sister Natalie, so people who will have deliberative voice. So I wonder if you have any wisdom or information or whatever, maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but I do think the structural thing can be a problem.
Yeah, the document has something that it's for the first time in the history of the church that appears. That the whole church was consulted and has done an honest diagnosis of the church. That has never happened. We see documents saying things about the church, documents that were written by an office in a curia or a couple of persons convoked by the Pope or by bishops. And this is a moment of such an honesty. I was impressed personally. So that's one thing that we have to admire of this synodal process, that is respecting completely the voices that are coming. And certainly the bishops are not going to change in one day or in 1 month or in 1 year. But what this process is generating, I use the figure that John 23rd said that he opened the window of the church and Pope Francis opened the doors. So the process is strong, and we're focusing only on individuals that make at the end decisions, when the process is such strong that it's creating even a pressure to those individuals that will make decisions. That's again in the whole experience that we're having as church right now, even if it's small, but it's something that will not have an end. It's a process. It's an empowerment of the word in each people.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So Lainey, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Deborah. I have so much respect for Professor Rafael Luciani and Pope Francis, my great love of since childhood of wanting church change. And I have quite a story. I could write it to him myself, and I've also written to Pope Francis as well, and cardinals, and it's such a great concern of the Holy Spirit that the synod, number one, have a concern that this is turning into a synod of politics and political speech and politics and rhetoric and lip service. The concern there is, and instead of listening to the Holy Spirit of the people of God, of the priests and of the women, I could write a tome about this, and I'm so happy that it is an amazing, incredible thing to see these changes in the worldwide church. So needed. Number one, the question of the concern and true disappointment over another year's delay by beloved Pope Francis. It seems an avoidance and a delaying of the inevitable change in our beloved Catholic Church. Number one, that delay, so disappointing. Why? Why another delay? Putting it off and closing the door, possibly to the Holy Spirit. And number two, the solving of the real priest shortages, worldwide priest shortages, through the 1139 rule of clerical celibacy and the restricting of holy women, the apostles, the face of God, to ordination, deacons, step one, deacons. These two very important issues of the worldwide priest shortage, and we have communion services, we all know this. And I fear, and it's so very sad to me to see, don't let this become of politics and not listening to the people when the people are speaking through the Holy Spirit, that if we open up the priesthood to both optional celibacy, married priests, go back, make the equalizer of the Eastern Rite. When you go to the Holy Land, you see the Coptics, you see all of those wonderful men and women in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Why indeed do we have, it's not fair for one, to not open up in the Latin Roman Rite, which we love so much. Open this up, and then women, being the holy women of Mary, the Mother of God, we need to address that.
Thank you.
It's not a church of the dead, it's a church of the living, it's a church of love.
Yes, thank you. It's not a year to put behind what is happening. It's an extension of the discernment, and this is huge because it's two assemblies in a circularity. That means that it doesn't end with a simple decision, but then it goes back for accountability to the people of God to see if their words were included. So it's new. And this will lead again to something that the process will help us to understand, because synodality as a practice is not known or accurate, known in most or the majority of the church, you know? So we have to understand that even if we have the highest expectations, we do not have still the consciousness of what is happening and what that process can lead us to. So it's a balance, because it's not easy, it's a transition, I insist. It's not a solution, it's a transition. And transitions are difficult.
Thank you very much.
60 years after the Second Vatican Council, and we have advanced a lot, but we still have much to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much for that question. I'm sorry to say that Professor Luciani needs to head out now, but I know that there's a few more hands up. So please do forward your comments or questions along to me, and I will get them to Professor Luciani, and we'll see about getting you some answers to your questions. Thank you so much.
I'm really happy even to record them. So send the questions, and I can be happy to send a record with the answers. Very happy to do that.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you very much. And thanks for being with us, Rafael. It was really good to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's a joy. Big hug.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Thank you very much. Bye, Ross. Bye, Deborah.